Welcome to Profiles on Nantucket Community Television, Channel 18. My name is Charley Walters. Plastics were things we take for granted. They've been around for generations. They do a lot of good. But as time goes on, we're realizing it's not all good. There are some bad aspects to plastics. They can be corrected. Many communities are doing exactly that. Nantucket took a step in that direction at the special town meeting in October of 2018. There was an article relating to single-use plastics in the town warrant. And here to talk about this is the sponsor of that article, Bruce Mandel. Thanks for joining me.
My pleasure.
Before we talk about what the article says, give me a lead-in to how you came to sponsor the article, what set of circumstances led you to that direction.
Okay, that's an interesting question. It's kind of a two-fronted issue. It was born years ago out of concerns from certain entities in Nantucket, the Nantucket Conservation Association and also the Nantucket Residents Association. We became concerned about water quality issues when there was concern about the nitrogen levels in certain water bodies like Long Pond, Hither Creek, and Nantucket Harbor, where the nitrogen readings were exceeding what was acceptable. And we were concerned with how can we address that? We needed to clean up our act. It kind of rippled into the proposal to expand the sewers to parts of Nantucket and the science behind that. And the citizens and those organizations started to delve into the numbers that were being bandied about the controllable components of nitrogen in the water.
So at this point, plastics is not part of the conversation.
Not even on my radar screen at this time a couple of years ago. And we found out that they were ascribing a large number of nitrogen, controllable nitrogen, to the septic systems in Nantucket on the west end, and a smaller number to other controllable sources. For example, the landfill. But the big number was septics. And we started to get involved into these numbers. We found out they weren't necessarily as accurate as we would like them to be. Studies had been done on the landfill's contribution, and we found out that they didn't use our landfill in the study. They used an off-island landfill and extrapolated that information into what they thought was happening on Nantucket.
Which might or might not have been accurate.
It turned out we don't think it was. It certainly wasn't site-specific. We found out that the anecdotal number assigned to the landfill's contribution to landfill was a simple question by the students to an employee at the landfill, at the Department of Public Works. What do you think the contribution is? And it was like, I don't know, 24, 25%.
When you say students, who are you talking about there?
These are the WPI, the Worcester Polytech.
Yeah, they come here every year and they have a project.
Several projects. They do very nice work.
They do.
So we started to unwind the numbers, and the Nantucket Conservation Association engaged a consultant because the water sampling at the landfill that's done periodically is tested, analyzed, and very technical reports are provided to the town. And when you read them, you really need to be almost an engineer or a scientist to understand them. We engaged a consultant. He put these things into layman's language for us. We made some suggestions about how to enhance and improve the testing. We found out that some of the groundwater sampling wells at the landfill had been covered over and they couldn't be tested. That's been corrected now that the new director is there. We also found out that the groundwater and surface water flow at the landfill goes directly toward Long Pond.
And just to be clear on this is a private consultant, yes, hired privately, not hired by the town.
These hired by the Nantucket Conservation Association with help from the Nantucket Residents Association.
And those are two independent private groups.
Separate groups.
Not town affiliated.
Well, only in their relationship with the good relationships with the town, but no, the town
they're
is
not part of the government apparatus.
Not part of the town government.
Yeah, okay.
And as we got more and more into the numbers, we realized the unmined cell at the landfill is still contributing toxins to the groundwater, and they're flowing toward Long Pond. How can we address this? Well, we know that the mining of that unmined cell is stopping in June of next year, 2019. And it's not going to be completed. So the strategy we understand is to cap it and seal it. But right now, every time it rains, when it snows and the snow melts, that moisture and water goes through that unlined cell, carrying with it toxins and whatever crap is in there into the groundwater.
For people who don't know or aren't familiar with the sorts of things you're discussing, why is it not lined as we speak?
It was built prior to the technology and the science of how we protect and build landfills. That landfill has been open for decades. Now we know a lot more about how these toxins get into our groundwater. Now we line the landfill cells before we use them. And we do have lined cells that are being used now.
But what you're talking about are parts of the dump that precede the current areas that are lined.
That's correct.
Okay.
And it's a large area. So the theory is, or the objective is, to reduce those toxins. Part of those toxins are plastic bags, plastic debris, and all kinds of other waste that's in the unlined cell. So when we talk to Waste Options, by ourselves, this is not town, this is our small group.
Yeah.
We take a tour and we see how they're operating.
This is the company that runs the dump.
This is the company that runs the landfill
Yeah.
and the recycling. And we find that the status of recycling today is different than it was a number of years ago. You remember when we used to separate our plastics into different numbers in the bins.
There were 3 or 4 chutes.
Correct. Now we single stream all
Yes.
plastics in, and this is because the recycling market has changed dramatically. Most of the plastics that this country, quote unquote, recycles was being shipped overseas. And it was primarily going to China and Vietnam, and they were processing it. Oftentimes it was ending up being just pushed into rivers, and it was flowing down into the Pacific Ocean. And that's where these swirling gyres of plastic come from. But the point is, China eventually said, you're sending us contaminated plastic. It has other stuff in it. The labels are still on it. It's got food waste in it. We're not accepting it anymore as of January 2018.
They're not taking any plastic, period.
No, nothing. So now, when we send our plastics off island, the folks at the landfill bail it up, and it gets put on trucks, and it goes on the boat, it goes to the mainland, and then it gets sold to a recycler. The recycler doesn't pay us for it. We pay the recycler to take it. They have nothing to do with it. They can only store it at this time. We do the same thing with the cardboard and the metal, except that has value. We are paid when we bring those off island.
Well, paper is in a similar situation because there used to be a couple of chutes for paper because that could be sold.
Right.
But as of right now, there's no market for that, and that's why when you go to the dump, you're told to throw your paper in with the household garbage and not down those chutes.
Exactly. There's no market for it. So when we ship our recycling off, we get paid for the cardboard, we get paid for the metal, and we pay for them to take the plastic. You subtract the money you pay from the money you get. The net result is called the net recycling credit. That is shared with the town and the operator of the landfill.
Waste Options.
Waste Options. The less plastic that we ship off, the more that net recycling credit pool is, the potential is the town will make some more money to share. So we started to go, well, there's an awful lot of plastic here. And it's costing us money to ship off. It's single use. Some of it is used only to go from the store to the car to the house.
Sometimes not even to the house.
Right. So sometimes, and it's a litter problem for the clean team. They collect hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds of debris from our roads, bike paths, and beaches, and most of it is plastic. So fast forward, in my professional career before I retired, I was involved with a construction attorney in Boston. His mother, an octogenarian, 80-something years old, lived in Concord. And her grandson, this lawyer's son, convinced his grandmother, we need to ban plastics in Concord, it's bad. He's ahead of the game. Today, we all realize plastics are bad. Petroleum-based plastics are bad. Plant-based plastics have merit in terms of biodegradability and compostability, and we can get into that.
We will.
But this woman wrote a bylaw, and she was challenged by not only the local vendors, but by the distributors and the manufacturers. And she was not successful the first time or two she presented this to our town meeting, and it got smaller and smaller and smaller in terms of the plastics they were going after until it was just the water bottles, and it passed. Since then, several other towns have embraced that exact bylaw language and have also passed similar bylaws. When I became interested in this, and because I knew the lawyer and his mother and the son, I said, you know, I'm going to take that bylaw framework and I think I'm going to expand the list to include other single-use plastics.
And that phrase single use is extremely important to what we're talking about.
It is. And the bylaw is geared to the commercial sale, distribution, and use of these petroleum-based single-use plastics. It's not meant to infringe on an individual's inadvertent use, although we would hope that individuals and families would embrace the concept and honor the island and its environment by trying to go along with the spirit of this. But it's the industry that produces these single-use plastics has a unique business plan. They produce the product, they ship it to us, they sell it to us, and then we, as consumers, become responsible for the proper disposal, the cost of disposing, and the environmental impact of not disposing of it properly becomes our responsibility.
And this, just to go back over what you were saying, this started out having nothing to do with plastics.
Right.
You were concerned with
Water quality.
in general, but you came across plastics in the process of finding out what the water quality is on Nantucket and why it is that way.
That's right.
and where the shortcomings are.
And part of that reasoning was, in the unlined cell, there's all these plastic bags. They're decomposing and leaching these toxins, these petroleum-based polymers that make up that plastic, leaching into the groundwater and possibly, likely, contributing to the nitrogen readings that we're getting. Now, the good news is the water quality on the West End is dramatically improving. The nitrogen levels are going down. The trend is in a good direction. Long Pond is starting to look better. Hither Creek is starting to look better. Nantucket Marine has a project where they're taking oysters, putting them in cages so the oysters can grow and reproduce and grow more, and they're putting them in the water along one of their walkways. The concept is one oyster can filter 50 gallons of water a day, and if you have 1,000 oysters,
Yeah.
you're going to clean up. So in conjunction with the town, Nantucket Marine has this program going. They've hired a young lady to help them with their environmental issues at their expense, and hopefully this program will grow and help clean also Hither Creek. we're very concerned about the water issues in Nantucket, and people are taking positive steps. But as you said, in a kind of a convoluted path, we come upon the poisons that are hurting our environment from plastics. So I thought, what the heck? Let's take a shot at this. Let's lead the way. And the more you do research, you find out Seattle is doing this. Europe is now considering banning certain single-use plastics, including plastic, what they call buds. I call them Q-tips. But they're made with plastic sticks, so they're banning those. They foul the septic systems. Flushable wipes made largely of plastics. There are countries and cities all over the world that are taking the step to reduce petroleum-based single-use plastic use.
And including Massachusetts municipalities.
That's right.
And we are now one of them.
And Nantucket is one of them. Nantucket is taking a bigger bite by listing other things other than those single-use water bottles, which, by the way, have just been found to have pieces of microplastics floating in that water. We have the best water coming from our water company. Why are we buying water that's got plastic floating in it?
It doesn't taste as good as Nantucket water anyway.
That's right. So we took a little bit of a bigger bite. We said, hey, what about single-use petroleum-based plastic plates, eating utensils, you know, the forks, knives, and spoons we get at the takeout, the cups and lids of single-use sodas, iced teas, whatever, straws and stirs. The town has a voluntary effort going on. Straws. We don't want to use plastic straws anymore.
Gotten a lot of publicity over the last 6 months.
And there are a lot of places that have already embraced it with sustainable straws made of plant material, of paper. There's some metal straws. There are glass straws,
which are cleanable.
Right. There are silicone, food-grade silicone straws that are flexible, go in a dishwasher, you can microwave them. There are all kinds of alternatives that many of the institutions, pubs, sandwich shops on Nantucket are already embraced and doing.
And of course, they're non-toxic. That goes without saying, but maybe it shouldn't go without saying. These are non-toxic
They're non-toxic
materials.
alternatives. But not everyone was embracing this. So I said, okay, the volunteer effort is working, it's growing, but you know what? Let's just make it the rule. This is how it's going to be. So I didn't get any resistance from the folks I spoke to. I spoke to some people at town. I spoke to some of the people at sandwich shops. It was going to be inexpensive. It was going to be a little more expensive when you buy straws in the bulk, 500, 1,000 straws at a time. It's maybe not even a half a cent a straw bigger. And if I'm paying $15 for a gin and tonic and they're giving me a plastic straw, which you don't need.
No, you don't.
But if a straw costs half a penny more on a $15 drink, they're not raising their prices. The green uses all of these good compostable and good straws and compostable utensils. They haven't raised any of their prices that I saw. People are embracing this. Stop and Shop is even embracing it. They have mesh bags now instead of the plastic bags.
In the produce section, yeah.
In the produce section. We're starting to see them bring in water in containers that are not those single-use plastic containers. They're recyclable, good, or better containers.
They're like those, I think of them as waxed paper containers that you see milk in, for example.
Similar to that. You go to Stop and Shop and you pick up a container of some of their prepackaged cheese that come from off island, you know, feta cheese, whatever. You turn the package over, it's got the little triangle.
Yes.
That's got the recycling, the resin identification code. You know, they're numbered 1 through 7.
Yep.
It's a 7 meaning other, but it says PLA under it.
Under the 7.
Just number 7, which is polylactic acid, which is a plant-based resin. That container will decompose
You can throw it on a compost heap.
You could, but you can't. It's not going to compost like your backyard compost. We'll get into composting if you want. But anyway, this is where things are heading, and Nantucket is embracing it. We included the coffee pods. Those are, you can break them down into their components. There's a metal lid, aluminum foil. Mm-hmm. There's the coffee, that's compostable. There's a paper mesh filter in it, but that cup cannot be recycled. It takes 700 years to decompose.
Well, some people have bought a single pod, which may be plastic, but they use it multiple times.
Reusable.
They buy ground coffee.
Yep.
So they're using one pod in the course of a week or a month or a year instead of
That's right.
7 in a week or 30 in a month or whatever.
It's way less expensive. It's better for you.
It is less expensive.
And they have stainless steel ones like that. There's all kinds of reusable pods. There are companies now making coffee pods that are completely biodegradable. The lid is made from a hemp-like or a paper-like fiber material that you can throw into a compost heap at home. It doesn't have the cup on it, it's got a little ring around it that fits in the machine. Mm-hmm. That ring is made from plant-based plastic. It's got a mesh on it that the coffee sits in. The claim is it'll decompose in 180 days.
Talk a bit about that phrase, plant-based plastics, because that sounds like a contradiction in terms.
It is. Plastics are made out of polymers, which is a chemical equation for a string of, you all seen those chemical equations in high school for H2O, and it's got the, it's got an H and it's got an O and it's got these little boxes and whatnot, right? You put a string of those chemicals together, it's called a polymer. The polymers can be made from petroleum products, oil, or they can be made from plant products. Those polymers could then be processed into plastic beads, petroleum plastic beads, plastic from plants, plastic beads, and those are made goes into molds that produce the various products. The petroleum-based plastics can only break down into petroleum elements. Bad for the environment. The plant-based ones break down into their basic elements from whence they came. All compostable, all biodegradable. When we say compostable, though, don't be confused by that. It doesn't mean you can throw it into your backyard compost pile and forget about it. Most of this compostable plastic can be collected, and it has to go to a commercial composting facility. When you buy a coffee at Cumbies, their cups don't have plastic linings on them. They're completely compostable. The lid is compostable, but it has to go to a commercial facility. There's only a couple of them off island. But there's a little bit of an, I'll call it experiment, hatching here on Nantucket. To be compostable, it goes off island. It has to be held at a temperature above 165 degrees for 3 to 5 days before it breaks down. The digester reaches that temperature.
The digester on Nantucket you're talking about.
That was
out at the dump.
Right. It was designed by Nelson Waddell, who I guess leases it or licenses it to use waste stoppers now. Anyway, if we can dedicate the digester for 3 or 5 days periodically and run these compostable plastics through it, we may be able to take care of that. But that gets us into how are we going to process and collect our waste going forward at the landfill. If we want to separate compostable plastics from the other bad plastics, we need a separate bin or a separate receptacle to do that. And that means we as citizens need to change our habits a little bit. Just like in the beginning when they said, we're going to start recycling and everybody was all upset, it's a pain in the neck. Eventually it became, hey, that's how we do things on Nantucket.
It gets to be second nature after a while. You
And
don't think
we're
about
one
it,
of
you
the
just do
best.
it.
we're one of the best recyclers in the country. And then when they said, no, we have to go to clear bags now, that was going to be a pain in the neck. But eventually, we're doing it. Soon we may be able to go to biodegradable plastic bags. So we're changing the way we handle things, and we're going to have to change the way we deal with our wastes going forward. The town just hired Graham Durovich as its recycling and solid waste coordinator. She's just getting started. She's got a very good background, and she's on top of these issues, and we want to be engaged in the process and discussions with her. In 2010, 2011, Worcester Poly had a group come over to do an energy study for us here. Part of their report suggested, 2011, that we, as an island, look to energy from waste, biodiesel fuel, things like that, on how to handle our future waste on Nantucket. And they recommended that we start educating the public about it, have them become familiar with the technology, because the studies we've been seeing from our consultants are saying, when we close the landfill, we're going to start shipping the stuff off, packaging it up, bundling it, trucking it, paying to ship it off to other landfills. My concern is, like China, those landfills may eventually say, no more. There are other ways to handle this, and we need to start looking at it, just like those WPI students suggested years and years ago. And there is an effort to look at things like gasification here. So it's a very complicated issue. It's not just plastics. You can't use these plastics anymore. You can't sell them. It's how we process going forward. Plastics are in our lives to stay. They make our cars lighter so that their mileage can be increased and they can meet federal standards. They make our life, you look in your house, how many products are plastic?
Oh, you can't count them. There's
But
so
they're
many.
not single-use plastics where
Yes.
you use them one time and throw them away.
Well, the bylaw addressing single-use plastics, when does that go into effect?
It goes into effect in June of 2020. The original proposal was 2019, but several of the users at town meeting said, hey, that's not enough time for us to get rid of our existing stock.
It was
use it
amended
up."
on the floor of the meeting.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's not enough time for us to find new distributions, and people, where do we buy our stuff? Might not be my existing suppliers and distributors. We need more time. And they're right. The plastic yolks. How do we deal with the plastic yolks? Well,
The things that hold the
the
six-pack of
things that
beer
hold
together.
the 6-packs and the 8-packs and the 12-packs. They're flexible. They're entanglement issues for animals. We've all seen pictures of the turtle with the crunched-in shell because it got entangled as a baby turtle. We've seen dead birds that are entangled in it. You've seen pictures of whales that have died and washed ashore, and they necropsy them, and they find tons of plastic in them. Not tons, but they find hundreds of pounds in them, clogging their digestive systems so they die.
Filling their stomachs, filling their intestines.
Exactly. The plastics are getting in our food supply. And as odd as it sounds, there was just a study done where the scientists collected feces from human beings in different countries and analyzed them and found microplastics in almost all of them. We're ingesting it. It's in the water, in those plastic single-use bottles. Studies were recently done, as recent as May of 2018. The woman who did that received a Heinz Award for it. Very dignified award. She found microplastics in almost 100% of the hundreds of bottles she tested from brand names that are sold here and elsewhere. So they're getting into the food supply. no study has been done that I'm aware of as to what the effects on humans are of ingesting these, but we know they get into the systems of fish and other animals that are in our food chain, and they're found in those animals' livers, intestines, and other body parts and organs. So my concern is, I don't think I want to drink the water out of those bottles anymore.
Well, to state the obvious, it is far from just a litter issue. This is a human health issue. This is
Health and
a
safety.
health hazard.
Health and safety. Carlsberg Beer just said, we're not going to use flexible yolks anymore. We've developed a degradable glue, an environmentally friendly glue. We're going to put that on our cans to hold them together so that when you buy them at the store, you can put them in your cart, you can put them in your bag, take them home. A brewery in California has come up with a 6-pack can holder that's made from their byproducts, barley, wheat, whatever. Not that you would want to, but it's edible. If it gets in the food chain, animals, turtles, fish, can actually eat it, and it's not going to hurt them.
Well, it also means they're not throwing something away.
Yeah.
They're using it again. So there's a practicality or aspect to it as well.
And we have people on this island, Scott Leonard, for example, with the Marine Mammal Alliance, is involved in entanglement issues. And most of those entanglements are large plastic ropes and whatnot from the ghost fishing gear. But the point is,
you can see seagulls with
plastic wrapped, with these
Sure.
yolks wrapped around them.
Yeah.
So this is an important issue to a lot of people on Nantucket, and I'm very pleased that this article passed and that we can build on it. And it's kind of a laboratory experiment. Let's see how this works. There's enforcement. It's not meant to be aggressive. It's a passive enforcement. If you see something, you call the administration. They might send someone out to look. Oh, you're selling these things you're not supposed to. You get a warning. It's not going to take a priority if there's nothing else for a police officer to do or a health inspector to do. It'll go on their plate, and when there are no other priorities, they go check it out. No one's going to be knocking on the kitchen door of any residence going, let me see what's in here. It's meant to be more of a voluntary, gosh, we have this bylaw, I'm not supposed to be doing this. It's a fine if I'm caught the second time. I don't want to get a bad reputation, social media, word of mouth. I think you're going to see a lot of compliance. The water in a box is being sold at the Green. Millie's Market's got them. Stop and Shop has got good stuff now. The managers at Stop and Shop are embracing this. Ted Miller over there stopped me. I was talking to him in an hour, and he proudly showed me a box of plant-based plastic straws, flexible straws that he's now stocking. So people are getting on the bandwagon here.
Well, people will pay attention to a bylaw. You can compare it to stop signs. A lot of times when you come to a stop sign, there's no car in sight, especially in the wintertime around Nantucket. But people will usually stop anyway because they know that's what they're supposed to do. And I think that kind of mindset will apply to this bylaw. They know they can get away with using a plastic straw, but you don't want to do it if you're not supposed to do it. Never mind the litter aspect, never mind the health aspect. If you're not supposed to do it, a lot of people will not do it for that reason.
I think you're right. And there's always companies and people who seek to work their way around a regulation because it's inconvenient to them, it's more costly to them, and the profit motive supersedes their concern about the environment and what's going on in our water, our groundwater, our surface water, and our landfill. If we can save space at the landfill, the life of the landfill is extended.
Yes.
6 months, a year, 2 years, while we figure out how we're going to process our waste in the future.
Or maybe use it
That's right.
to help power the landfill.
Good point. So these are all issues that kind of ripple from this bylaw, and they rippled into its creation. So it's not like there was no thought process going into this. I had concern that, number one, it would be defeated. I was encouraged to do it at the special town meeting rather than the annual town meeting, because something like this could get lost in all of the issues at the annual. This special town meeting, I was encouraged because the marijuana issues were on it, and I felt that that population coming there would be interested in an environmental issue like this. And unfortunately, there weren't a lot of people at that special town meeting.
There weren't. That's a whole other issue there.
But this was overwhelmingly approved.
Yes, it wasn't even close.
So my hope is, for example, that the high school students get behind this. And they can encourage entities, charitable organizations, the hospital, Remain Nantucket, to perhaps help by giving each student a reusable water bottle that they can carry with them not only for 1 year, but for their school career. It might say Whalers on it with a little place where they can put their name on it. But that whole population needs to embrace this issue of protecting the single source aquifer that we all depend on here.
That's a good point. It is a single source. If you foul this one up, there's not the aquifer next door to tap into.
That's right.
There isn't one.
You're right. So all of those issues are why I push this. And it takes a lot of work for a citizen to push an article forward.
Yeah, I'm sure it does.
So this was a good exercise.
Well, it was. I'm glad you did it.
Thank you.
Bruce Mandel, thanks for coming on the show today. This has been very informative. Glad to be hearing all this.
I'm glad you asked me. Thank you.
For Profiles, I'm Charley Walters. Thanks for tuning in. Please join me again next time.